With a sad heart, I watched Kevin pack his briefcase from the doorway of our bedroom. Our relationship seemed like a thick cloud that had descended upon our previously contented house, strangling the tension between us. My voice was hardly audible above a whisper when I continued, "I can't believe you're doing this." Glancing up, Kevin's eyes were icy. "Amelia, what?" Heading into the office. "This family needs someone to keep things going." His reasons were a stark reminder of the choice I had made only a few days prior, and they hurt and cut deep. I stepped back into the room and said, "You know that's not fair." In response, simmering in my chest was anger. I quit my job for us, for our family. His actions betrayed his frustration as he snapped his briefcase shut. "No, you left your work because the strain was too much for you to bear. You now want me to take up the slack too." At what he said, I winced. They made a big impression. It was true that I had been finding it difficult to get used to being a stay-at-home mother. However, I never anticipated Kevin's level of hatred. I responded, "I'm trying, Kevin," my voice quivering with passion. "It's not easy to give up a career I loved." With a heavy sigh, he ran a hand over his hair. "I'm not looking for a fight this evening. We have some serious business to discuss." The sound of little feet splattering down the hallway stopped us before we could say anything more. With her teddy bear fiercely clasped to her bosom and her golden locks ruffled, our daughter Harriet emerged from the doorway. She questioned naively, "Mommy, Daddy, why are you fighting?" I knelt to her level and feigned a grin. "Dear, we're not fighting. Just now, Daddy and I were chatting." Harriet was scooped up by Kevin, who then kissed her forehead. "Your mom is correct, Princess. Everything is all right. How about you go look for Grandma? She's probably preparing pancakes." I felt a tinge of regret as Harriet ran off. How many times had small ears heard our arguments? Kevin put down his suitcase and his face softened a little. "All right, tonight we'll discuss. I have a suggestion that might help us get back on course." I simply nodded, not believing I could say anything. I had the unshakable impression that something was very wrong in our family, between us. As he was leaving for work, I was nervous about the conversation we would be having that evening and what it would mean for our future. Because of the nagging doubt, dull chores, and my in-laws' constant chatting, the day dragged on. I was uncomfortable and hungry, waiting for the adult talk that didn't revolve around gossip or grandkids. By the time Kevin got back home with the kids asleep, we retired to the study after supper. Breaking the quiet, Kevin leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. He started off by saying, "I've been thinking about how we can tackle some of our challenges." I arched an eyebrow. With a little smile on his lips, he nodded. "What if we buy my parents a house with some of our savings? They could get closer, assist with the kids more, and take up a lot of the burden for the two of us." I sensed the room's air disappearing. "Our reserves, the funds we set aside for our future, the college funds for the kids." Kevin stopped smiling. "I assumed you would be pleased with this. It offers a lot of solutions to our issues." I raised my voice. "Our issues or the issues with your parents?" With a look of annoyance on his face, Kevin stood up. "Why do you make things so hard for me? It's the best course of action for our family." I watched in disbelief as he stormed out. Was anything like this actually taking place? Had my spouse suddenly proposed, without my consent, to spend our life savings to purchase a home for his parents? Feeling more alone than ever, I buried my face in my hands. What was going to happen to me, and more importantly, how had we arrived at this point? I heard quiet sounds coming from the kitchen the following morning, which I assumed to be those of Kevin and his mother. I walked down the corridor, being cautious not to trip on the noisy floorboard next to the stairs. "Mom, she's being unreasonable," Kevin said in a clear voice. I assumed she would be pleased with this. His mother gave a kind but clear response. Oh my goodness, some ladies simply cannot bear the demands of raising a family. Not every person is suited for it. I bit my lip as hurt and rage battled within me. Is that how people understood me? That I was unable to manage it? Perhaps if we just move forward with the plans, Kevin said, she might change her mind. Really, it's for the best. I'd had enough. Not bothering to hide, I stormed into the kitchen. Kevin, for whom is this the best? With remorse lighting over their cheeks, they both sprang. First to recover, Kevin's mother put on a cheesy smile. Good morning, my love. How was your night's sleep? Disregarding her, I concentrated on my husband. Were you going to talk behind my back about this, or were you going to discuss it with me at all? Even Kevin seemed a little embarrassed. Amelia, that isn't how it is. We were only talking. I interrupted him, talking about making big financial decisions without me. About the future, ours and our children's. His mother intervened, always the mediator. Let's not get too fired up just yet. Would you mind if I took the kids to the park so you two could have some alone time? She was yelling for Harriet and Jason as she hurried out of the kitchen before I could object. There was a sharp stillness between Kevin and me when the front door closed. You cannot continue doing this, I murmured quietly. You cannot continue to exclude me from decisions that impact our family. Kevin let out a sigh and ran his fingers through his hair. Amelia, I'm not shoving you out. I'm searching for answers. Kevin, you've been the one who's been distant, I snapped. You've been acting like a failure ever since you persuaded me to quit my job because you said I needed to focus on the family. I moved away from him as he grabbed me. That is incorrect. Simply put, I believed that doing this would simplify things. Parents might assist with the children. You receive more assistance. More assistance. I gave a sour laugh. Your father hardly recognizes me, and your mother can hardly contain her hatred for me. Kevin grew stern-faced. That is unfair. They have been really supportive since you left your work. Supportive, I sneered. They have been choking. You want to spend our money to buy them a house, but I can't make a single choice about our kids without your mother questioning me. He raised his palms. What else should we do with it? We could use the assistance since it is currently available. I looked into his eyes and saw him clearly for the first time in many months. This man was not the one I wed. This was someone else entirely. Kevin, I can't handle this anymore, I said. I refuse to be excluded within my own family. His face became more composed. Come on, Amelia, we are able to resolve this. We just must. He was cut off by the sound of the front door opening. The enthusiastic chatter of our children filled the home, accompanied by the voices of his parents. Daddy, Mommy, Harriet yelled. See what we discovered at the park. I forced a grin onto my face as our daughter ran into the kitchen, brandishing a glittering pebble. However, I saw Kevin's mother's rough glance above her head. She was certain that she had won this round. I silently vowed as I bent to gaze at Harriet's treasure. This wasn't the end. I wouldn't allow them to drive me away from my own family. Something needed to shift quickly. Staring at the laptop screen in front of me, I sat at the kitchen table. I could see glimmers of the life I had left behind in each email and message that scrolled by. My fingers ached to write a resume so I could go back to practicing law, where I used to be quite successful. I was brought back to reality by the sound of Kevin's car driving into the driveway. I shut off the laptop quickly as remorse overcame me. How did I get here? I mean, hadn't I promised my family this? When Kevin spotted me, his face lit up, and he came in. There you are. Hello, we could take the kids out to supper today. What do you think? I faked a laugh. That sounds fantastic. Where are the children? He answered, Mom took them to the mall. She said something about fresh school clothes. My lips twisted into a grin. Did she? I believed that this weekend we had decided to accomplish it together. Without seeming to notice my dismay, Kevin shrugged. Mom extended an offer. I thought you would get a vacation from it. A break, as if I needed to get away from my own children. I tried not to cry while I swallowed my hurt. Kevin, we need to talk about your parents, about this whole scenario. His shoulders stiffened as he groaned. Not this again, Amelia. I believed that this was behind us. What was the past? Past me making decisions for our family? I got up, my rage exploding. Kevin, you can't just keep making decisions on your own, not about our savings in particular. He narrowed his eyes. What's that supposed to mean? I inhaled deeply. Earlier I heard you talking on the phone. You were conversing with a real estate agent, right? Kevin looked surprised and flushed. It was only a preliminary discussion. I was obtaining data. Without first speaking with me, I concluded on his behalf. He raked a hand through his hair once again, his voice brimming with frustration. Amelia, what do you want from me? I'm attempting to act in our family's best interests. Our family, I said once again. Not the talk of your folks, not the idealized version of our family that your mother had. We, Kevin, me, you, and the children. He fired back. My parents are part of our family too. Why do you not see that? Something inside of me snapped. Because they're assuming control. Your father ignores me during family dinners. Your mother scolds me for being a parent. And you're allowing it to happen. Kevin grew stern-faced. That is unfair. They only want to help. I chuckled in disbelief. Is that what you call it? When your mother insults my parenting? When your father avoids me at family dinners? Kevin responded, You're exaggerating. But I could tell he was doping himself. I took a step forward to him and spoke in a deep, low voice. Kevin, am I mistaken? Tell me this, when was the last time your parents weren't involved in a choice that we decided on together? He parted his lips, then shut them again, unable to respond. That's what I thought, I said as my strength began to go. Kevin, I can't continue to live this way. There must be a change. I briefly had a glimpse of the thoughtful, kind man I'd married. However, he soon closed his face once more. You're accurate. Something indeed has to change. You must acknowledge that this is how we now live, Amelia. My folks are here to stay. We'll all be happier if you embrace that sooner rather than later. I was filled with shock and sadness as I looked at him. Had this actually been the state of our marriage? The sound of the front door opening and the eager talk of our kids were followed by the resounding voice of Kevin's mother. She called, We're back, and wait until you see what we bought. Kevin turned to meet his mother and our children, giving me a look that suggested quite obviously that our talk had ended. As I stood there, horrifying reality overwhelmed me. This was no longer simply about Kevin's parents. This had to do with our marriage's future, and for the first time, I wasn't sure whether it really had one. I sat at the desk in our shared study, pen poised over paper, heart thumping in my chest. The place was oddly quiet. This was it, the breaking point. I looked at my watch. It was 2:37 a.m. with his head still in the clouds. Kevin had no idea that our world was about to rock. The kids were safely nestled into their beds, oblivious to the unrest that had been building for several months. My hand trembled as I started writing. The kids and I will be gone by the time you read this, Kevin. This is no longer how I can live. My eyesight became blurry as I released years of grief, disappointment, and betrayal onto the paper. I wrote about my experiences of being ignored, about his parents' persistent interference, and about the dreams I had given up only to be viewed as an outsider in my own home. I let out a sob as I signed my name at the bottom. I smothered the sob quickly, not wanting to wake anyone. This was not the future we had planned together, and it was not how I had expected my life to turn out. However, things happen, people change, and sometimes you have to have the courage to alter your own narrative. I carefully folded the letter and put it where Kevin could see it, in the middle of his desk. Quietly, I made my way upstairs in an attempt to rouse the kids. "Mommy," I shook Harriet gently awake, and she murmured something sleepy. "What's wrong?" she inquired while rubbing her eyes. I whispered, "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart," and lied. "We're taking a little getaway. Could you please assist me with your brother like a big girl?" Though still half sleepy, she nodded. Being the lighter sleeper of the two, Jason was usually simpler to wake up. In a matter of minutes, I had them both dressed and prepared to depart, holding their beloved stuffed animals firmly in their arms. I held my breath as we tiptoed down the steps, hoping that Kevin wouldn't wake up. His snoring from our bedroom was a comforting sound, but it also cut deeply. I no longer felt like I knew this man whom I had previously loved more than anything. We arrived at the car without any problems. Harriet's little voice sliced through the evening air as I strapped the children into their seats. "Where's Daddy, Mommy? Will he not go with us?" Even though I knew the question was coming, I froze, unprepared for it. "No, my dear, Daddy must remain here. But don't worry, we'll see him shortly." Even though the lie hurt my tongue, I couldn't bring myself to utterly destroy their reality. Not quite yet. My attention was drawn to a movement as I slid into the driver's seat. Kevin's mother was standing there in the upstairs window. When our gazes locked, time seemed to stop. I saw the beginning of comprehension, a spark of wrath, and then, shockingly, something that nearly seemed like satisfaction. I fired the engine and slid out of the driveway. Without thinking, I drove through the lonely, dark streets with shaking palms on the steering wheel. To what destination were we heading? How would we proceed? My head was filled with questions that felt like they would never end. However, I felt calmer when I looked at my sleeping kids in the rearview mirror. We would work things out. It was necessary for us to. My phone buzzed just as the first rays of dawn were starting to strike the sky. My blood ran cold as I saw Kevin's name flash on the screen with a message. "You have no right to remove my kids. My attorney will get back to you, Amelia. You're not going to get away with this." My resolve strengthened, and I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. Now there was no turning back. I would confront the next challenge and any upcoming struggles for the sake of my children and myself. I allowed myself a tiny grin as the sun rose, casting a picture of opportunity and optimism over the earth. This was only the start of a new chapter in our narrative, not its conclusion. I arrived at a dilapidated motel's parking lot, fatigue filling my body. Despite the mess in our lives, the children's faces were serene as they slept soundly in the back seat. I was about to cry as I propped my head on the steering wheel when I heard a tap on the window. "Amelia, is that you?" Blinking in shock, I looked up. My high school best friend Jasmine was there, gazing through the glass, a face I hadn't seen in a long time. "Jasmine," I gasped, wiped my eyes hastily, and got out of the car. "What are you doing here?" She drew me into a close embrace. "This place is managed by me. Yet I forget about myself. What is happening? Are you all right?" Something inside me shattered at the concern in her voice. Before I knew it, I was crying in her arms and telling her the entire tale in between breaths. With each phrase, Jasmine's expression became more serious as she listened. Jasmine gave me a shoulder squeeze after I was done. "You won't remain in this hole. Come on, I'll give you my extra room." After an hour, the kids were nestled into cozy beds, and I took a seat at Jasmine's kitchen table, enjoying a warm cup of tea. "So what's your plan?" Jasmine inquired politely. Feeling confused, I gazed into my tea. "I'm not sure. I simply could not stay there any longer. However, I can see from Kevin's text that he will fight for the kids. Jasmine's eyes became stony. Now you attack, Amelia. You've always been the sharpest person I know. You're capable of doing this. I said, I don't even have an attorney, as the truth of my position hit home. A cunning smirk appeared on Jasmine's face. To be honest, I think I could assist with that. Do you recall Stephen from your time in high school? A beat skipped in my heart. Stephen was the boy I'd secretly lusted after for years. What about him? I asked. He's a divorce lawyer now, one of the best in the state, reasoned Jasmine. She paused, then took a step forward. He always had a thing for you. My cheeks began to flush, and then I felt guilty as I was leaving my spouse. I found myself blushing over a crush from high school. Jasmine, I cannot afford a top-tier attorney. I moved on from everything. Jasmine dismissively waved her hand. Let me speak with him. Just get along with him, please, for me. My phone buzzed, and it was another text from Kevin. Before I could reply, my folks are worried. How could you harm our family in this way? I'll make sure you never see the kids again, so go home immediately. I gave Jasmine the message while shaking. Her expression grew serious. That resolves the matter. Stephen is the first person I'm phoning in the morning. That night, I couldn't fall asleep. While I lay in bed, the sensation that I was perched on a cliff persisted in my mind. Stephen's meeting seemed like the end of the road, like my marriage had officially ended. However, as I considered Kevin's icy reasons and his parents' oppressive presence, I concluded that my marriage had long since ended. I just hadn't had the guts to say it. I heard Jasmine's voice in the corridor when I woke up the following morning. Yes, Stephen, you can meet her at 2 p.m. Many thanks for it. Jasmine turned to face me as I came out of the bedroom, her expression a mix of excitement and trepidation. Amelia, Stephen agreed to meet with you today. My heart pounded. This was the turning point in my life and the turning point in my children's lives as well. Great, I said, astonished by the volume of my voice. I hugged my drowsy kids and got ready for the day. As I did, hope kindled in me, something I hadn't felt in years. I no longer felt alone. No matter what lay ahead, I felt ready to fight for the life I deserved for the first time in a very long time. I waited in Stephen's office, smoothing down my shirt and attempting to get my anxiety under control. It was obvious he had changed from the bashful youngster I recalled when he stepped in. Stephen held out his hand with a confident, comforting look on his face. It's been too long, Amelia. I apologize that we have to meet in this manner. A familiar flutter emerged in my gut as we sat down, but I ignored it. This was about my future, my children's future, not about past crushes or what-ifs. Stephen listened carefully as I described my circumstances, his brow furrowing at every new detail. He leaned forward, his gaze fierce after I was done. I will not sugarcoat this, Amelia. This may turn heated, especially with Kevin's parents involved and his wealth. However, I can assure you that we will battle to the death. Something within me was sparked by his words, a fire I had long since contained. How do we start? We plotted for the next 60 minutes as Stephen described our strategy. I sensed the return of my previous legal feelings, and we began discussing the details. When my phone beeped, I quickly looked at the screen. It's Kevin. I have to take this. As I left Stephen's office, Kevin's tone was composed and icy. Where are you, Amelia? My parents are devastated. The children must be brought home right now. Taking a deep breath, I prepared myself. No, Kevin, I'm not going to return. I've hired an attorney. Please get in touch with him for any more matters. A moment of startled quiet fell. Then Kevin's voice became angry. Do you really believe you can take my kids and get away with it, Amelia? I'm going to ruin you. You'll be lucky if you see them again when I'm through. The call ended. Stephen put his hand on my shoulder and pulled me back to the present moment as I stood there trembling. "Are you all right?" he said, his expression filled with worry. I nodded and wiped away the tears. I wasn't even aware I was shedding tears. Stephen placed his hands on my shoulders and said, "Hey, we will not let it occur, Amelia. You're not alone in this battle, and you're stronger than you realize." I was overcome with feelings as I stared into his eyes, including dread, thankfulness, and something more I couldn't quite put my finger on. I took a step back and collected myself. What should we do next? Stephen's face took on a serious expression. We must apply for temporary custody right now. We also need to discuss your career, Amelia. Puzzled, I blinked. My profession? But I abandoned that. Exactly, Stephen stated in a stern tone. And in court, that will be used against us. We must demonstrate your ability to care for the kids independently. It struck me like a stone. I had sacrificed everything for my family, and now I could lose my kids because of that one sacrifice. With uncertainty beginning to seep in, I said, I don't know if I can go back. Stephen grew more determined. Amelia, the woman I knew in high school, was determined and could accomplish anything. You only need to locate her again because that woman is still there. That day, when I walked out of Stephen's office, my head was spinning. Rebuilding my profession, fighting Kevin and his parents, and attempting to keep my kids safe felt like an impossible task. But I felt a glimpse of optimism for the first time in years. Harriet's big eyes met mine as I tucked her and Jason into bed that evening. "When are we going home, Mama?" My heart tightened. "Oh, my dear," I replied, drawing her near, "we're at home now. Our home is wherever we are when we are together." I vowed in silence as I held my daughter. I would build us a new home, one that was free of love, respect, and hardship, no matter how long it took or how fierce the battle was. I was prepared for the difficult path ahead. The old Amelia was coming to her senses and ready to reclaim her life. In front of me stood the courtroom, a rising reminder of the conflict I was going to engage in. Grasping my suitcase firmly, I attempted to calm my anxiety. Our interim custody court was today, and I knew that Kevin and his parents would make a big deal out of it. Stephen touched my shoulder with a kind hand. "You can succeed, Amelia. Keep in mind all we planned." I nodded, and as we stepped into the building, I inhaled deeply. I saw Kevin, his parents, and their attorney huddled together. My fury boiled at my mother-in-law's nasty expression. When the hearing started, I watched in growing terror as Kevin's attorney presented me as an unstable, careless mother who had deserted her family on a whim. They brought up my choice to resign from my position, misrepresenting it as proof that I couldn't support the kids. Stephen expertly made our case when it was our turn, emphasizing my years of successful legal profession and commitment to my kids. However, I noticed the judge's doubtful look. Uncertainty tore at me. Had I committed a grave error? I noticed Kevin's mother talking loudly in the hallway during our recess break. Naturally, as soon as we gain custody, we'll be moving in to help with the kids instead of some unstable mother who can't decide what she wants out of life. They need a secure environment. A part of me broke. I marched up to her before I had a chance to consider. "How could you?" I growled. "From the beginning, you have been attempting to push me away." "I'm not. I just discovered aspects of who I had assumed to be lost forever." Stephen reached out to touch me, and his touch ignited something within me. "Maybe we could grab dinner sometime, just the two of us, now that the dust has settled." I saw warmth, adoration, and the potential for more as I gazed into his eyes. I paused for a second, old worries threatening to come back, but then I remembered all that I had accomplished and all that I had conquered. "Yes, please," I murmured quietly. I thought back on my journey, including the hardships, times of hopelessness and agony that had led me here. As the last of the sunshine illuminated the sky in dazzling hues, this was where they had all led. I had regained my strength, my freedom, and a network of support I never realized I needed. Even though the future was still unknown, I felt optimistic about it for the first time in a long time. I still had my independence, my kids, and maybe a future worth of love ahead of me. This wasn't simply the end. This was only the beginning. As I understood this, I savored my wine and felt Stephen's warm hand in mine. My start, and I was prepared to enjoy every second of it.